brought me on this little box.
We're going to put you in the box.
In the box. Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Leslie. I'm an alcoholic. I'm also a recovering crystal methamphetamine addict, and a very grateful member of the program of Al-Anon. I want to thank Scooter. Called me probably the day after last year's Roundup. It was really soon, and said, "What are you doing a year from now?" I said, "Like, I know." Jesus, I have no earthly idea. Alcoholics Anonymous has given me this huge life. I did 45 cities last year doing my stand-up comedy and going to conferences like this, and I just have this huge life. And he asked me what I was doing, and I said, well, I don't know, and we kept in touch. And it's really hard for me to make commitments because of my job, but I worked it out, and I'm so glad that I did this, my first trip to Colorado, and I got in last night about 1 o'clock, and I went to take a shower, and all of a sudden I thought, I feel high. Everything was like shimmery, and I thought, ooh, maybe I'll move here, because I can like feel high and keep my sobriety days, which is something we all want, But then I was told, no, you get used to it, and as with anything, you'll lose the high. But I just start at the beginning. I fell out of the womb, and I landed smack dab in my mother's high heels. And this was in the hills of Tennessee, and my daddy was a lieutenant colonel in the Army. It was not exactly the son he envisioned, but I had this amazing mom. She's going to really figure big in my story because some wonderful things have happened in sobriety to heal my relationship with my mother. But my mother was the perfect mother for a gay son. I thought she was a fairy princess. My mother was so beautiful, and she was bashful, and she had this blonde. My mother never bought into fads, so it was sort of like a modified bouffant. It was very Jackie O with just a touch of the Supremes, and and she would sit and spray. I loved to watch my mother get ready to go, to church, because that's all we ever did. That's the only thing we ever went to was church. But she would spray her hair a little dab of Shalimar, and I just adored my mother. And she had this really amazing wardrobe. Back then they had these things called falls that you would, clip on right here. And, I would practice and my fall. But my mother and my grandmother, who was also figured very big, my sweet grandmother, Miss Mary Lucille, they took one look at little Leslie and they thought, oh, he's going to need some help. And they sort of circled the wagons as only good Southern women can do. And my mother and my grandmother created this amazing secret garden where it was okay for little boys to play with dolls. It was okay for little boys to read Trixie Belden and Nancy Drew instead of those Hardy Boys, those rambunctious Hardy Boys. It was okay for little boys to sew doll clothes and make pot holders. I was very artistic. It was okay for this little boy to do whatever he wanted, except shh, no, honey, let's not show Daddy. So even though I had this sort of amazing childhood where I was allowed to do what was my nature, I knew from the get-go that there was something shameful about me and about what I was, and my dad, my wonderful sponsor, who you got to hear last year, Don Norman, I love what he said. He said, he did the best he could with the light he had to see with. My daddy, this is the 1950s, this is the hills of Tennessee. What is the greatest fear a man could have? That his son was going to turn out homosexual, and I left very little doubt, My biggest ambition when I was little, there was, long before MTV, for you older people may remember, there was a show called Hullabaloo, and it had go-go dancers on white cubes, and I was transfixed. And they would ask me when I was little, little boy, do you want to be a fireman when you grow up? Do you want to be president of the United States? I said, no, I want to be a go-go dancer. So to achieve that level of expertise that I saw on Hullabaloo, I knew that I had to practice, and so I sort of commandeered the coffee table in the living room, and I pushed all the furniture back, and I had my one little record. You young kids have no idea what we had to go through. You had to first move the thing from 78 RPMs down. You didn't want to go all the way to 33. You had to stop at 45 RPMs. And then you had this little plastic piece you had to smash down there in the middle. And I had one, my one record that I had was Wipeout by the Safaris. And so, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So my daddy would come home with all of his army buddies. And there would be his firstborn son, and you can hear I'm 54 years old, I have a high squeaky voice now. When I was a kid, I had the squeakiest little voice. Daddy, watch me do the pony! Daddy! So, my dad used to call me son as if he was in deep pain. He'd just say, oh, son. But my dad was killed in a plane crash. It was horrendous. I was 11 years old, which is a horrible time for a boy to lose his dad. Plus, I can remember to the core of my being, I knew that I was somewhat of a disappointment to my dad. And I lived with that, I remember thinking when I was like 12 or so, because I discovered I smoked pot and tripped on acid before I ever tasted. I'm that generation, and I was 14 years old in 1969, 68, which was the summer of love in San Francisco, and I just wanted to be a hippie. My heroes were rock stars that are now dead from the disease of alcoholism, like your Jim Morrisons and your Janis Joplins, and those were my heroes. And I grew my hair. I was kind of like a rock and roll troll doll. I had like this tall with all this hair, and I wanted to be a hippie. And I'll tell you something really interesting. All my life, I wanted to get to San Francisco. That was the Mecca, not only for hippies, but on into when I came out of the closet for gays. If any of you saw the movie Milk, that just sort of captured it for me. That was it. It was Mecca. It's where we wanted to be. When I finally made it to San Francisco, all my life wanting to get to San Francisco and smoke pot and hang on the streets and, do that thing in that park and, whatever, and relive the summer of love. And when I finally got to San Francisco, I was 3 years sober, and it was the first time I had ever been invited to speak. Your speaker last night was on the podium with me, where Miss Lynette was with me, and it was held in the Bill Graham Auditorium, and it's the oldest gay recovery convention in the world. They started in 1973, I think. And listen, those girls know how to do listen, the Enya plays, Enya, and the lights go down, and all the flags from every year begin to descend from the ceiling. And, it starts like psychedelic in the 70s, and then it moves right into the 80s and 90s. And you see, I sat there with 3 years of sobriety. Now, what had happened that day was I had called my mom. It's held in the Bill Graham Auditorium, which is on the place where the Fillmore West used to be. See, there are two rock emporiums. These young guys are like, whatever, yeah. But this was like Mecca. This is Fillmore West was where all the bands had played. Well, and Bill Graham was the rock and roll impresario, who brought all the bands together. Well, I called my mom and told her. She got mixed up and thought I was headlining the Billy Graham crusade. Finally, something she could be proud of. But to stand there and think, wow, everything's full circle. All my life wanting to get to San Francisco and do dope and drop out. And here I am, 3 years sober in front of thousands of alcoholics being asked to tell my story. I thought, wow, that's a gift. That's what you get around these rooms. These little bam, wow, can you believe it? And now I'm way off track. Where was it? We were baton twirling yet? No, we were, baton twirling. Okay, let's move on to baton twirling. My mother also was, my daddy died. We're past baton twirling. But anyway, there's a funny story. My mother was a champion baton twirler, and she taught me this routine, and I was out in the front yard, and I was really good. I could throw it under my legs and spin. I could do that pose at the end, really good. And so my daddy, once again, drives up with all his army buddies. I'm like, Daddy, watch me twirl. Daddy. Daddy. He's like, son. He said, son, why don't you twirl in the house? I said, Mama's scared I'll break something. He said, son, I'll pay for whatever you break, if you'll please. But so back to my dad's killed in this plane crash, and I remember thinking, because that's when I discovered alcohol and drugs. I'm 14 years old. And I see kids today, and they seem to be, that twittering, and they're just, I don't know, I was a bundle, I was all arms, and I was just this awkward kid that didn't know what to do with myself. And the first time that I had a friend who was an Episcopalian. See, we were Baptists, teetotaling Baptists, but I had to sneak out to see my friend. She was an Episcopalian. And one New Year's Eve, I was 14 years old, and we decided we were going to get in her parents' liquor cabinet, and we started drinking out of coffee cups, everything. Here's a shot of this, cream de menthe. Oh, they become so sick as I've ever been. I ended up in the hospital. First time, dead, drunk in a ditch. That was the beginning. Drunk in a lot of ditches. But that was the first time, 14 years old. But the one thing I do remember was that as that alcohol hit me, all of a sudden, I was adorable. And the more I drank, the more adorable I became. Honey, I was just flat out precious, And all of that awkwardness, and I really realized very early, especially being gay in the hills of Tennessee at 14 years of age, it was a lot easier to be gay when I was loaded, period. Because that is what I drank of. I've never been to a gay bar sober in my life. I was the one to take 2 Quaaludes and 3 cocktails where you came to get me. Because what I wanted to do, I found in an old diary a recipe for the perfect high. I had written down that you get up in the morning, and before you eat, you take 2 black RJS's. Those were like this, it was trucker speed. Honey, knock your dick in the dirt. This was, you could drive from California to the tip of Maine about 10 minutes. This was pre-crystal meth. They were called Black Beauties. And you would take 2 Black Beauties on an empty stomach, and then, of course, you were speeding all day long, and you didn't eat. And then I remember you were supposed to take a Quaalude, which was like a downer, and chew it, so that you would get off quicker. Take 2 Quaaludes. And I had this, because see, the goal was to hit the club right, when it all hit. To walk into the gay bar. Of course, you always overshot the mark, And you came staggering in. But, the goal was to hit the club right when it all hit, and you were fabulous, and a lot of times what would happen, that speed would kick in, and it would take me so long getting ready. All of a sudden, oh my God, the bar's closed, all dressed up and nowhere to go. That happened a lot, especially with Crystal. That happened a lot with Crystal meth. But I remember thinking, when I was a kid, if I could get out of the hills of Tennessee, if I could get away, if I could find people like me, if I could get away, because I'm going to hit on the Baptist church a little bit. I've been baptized 14 times. It never did take. But I'm going to hit on that. But I remember thinking, if I could find people like me, if I could just my travels, I left home at 17 and traveled and went here and there and end up in West Hollywood where there's queers hanging from the trees. And I think the loneliest I have ever been is sitting in the Gold Coast on Santa Monica Boulevard at 12 noon on a Tuesday when, the party was supposed to have ended. Was it Friday or Saturday that the party started? And now it's Tuesday, and I'm still on a speed run trying to drink, hoping to find, because hustlers also, rent boys are a big part of my story, and it wasn't about sex. I wanted someone to come home and sit with me till I could fall asleep. And then they'd rob me. But and sometimes I would bring the same one back to rob me again, You took the vase last time, how about the matching one, On this side, they would rob me. But I was so isolated in my disease, just to get someone. But surrounded by people like me. And do you know, it was not, I was 42 years old when I got sober. And I walked into a straight meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have no idea how I got there. I don't remember. I had to have taken the bus because my driver's license had been taken away, and I was living way out in the San Fernando Valley. It was a meeting in Studio City, and I walked in, and I'm telling you, I think I exhaled for the first time in my life. When it hit me by about my third meeting, that my fucked up life had nothing to do with the fact that I grew up homosexual in the hills of Tennessee, that I had a dad that I didn't think embraced me, that I was in a religion that I didn't think embraced me, nothing. I'm an alcoholic, and there's a solution. This feeling of just exhaling finally, that there was maybe some hope. And the first meeting that I went to, I remember I looked around and I thought, so it's come to this. It's just, I sort of got it, but it reminded me of Sunday school. It was like, I don't know, everybody was so chipper and they were laughing about things that I didn't think was funny. And I just sat there and I had on my armor. I love when I see people come in their black motorcycle jackets and their sunglasses, and they're on a court cart or something. It's like, fuck you, I don't have to be here, and all. And you see them slowly begin to shed. I had this fishing hat. I don't know what I was wearing, this old fishing hat, because someone reminded me of that. And I had this jacket, and I was all like this, and I was on the front row. I somehow knew to sit on the front row, or maybe there were just not any other seats. It was a straight meeting. And right near the end of the meeting, they asked me, they said, would our new friend like to share? And I'm not exactly a pillar of masculinity. I mean, I open my mouth and 50 yards of purple chiffon come flying out. And I've always been real self-conscious of that, I was sent home from school when I was a little boy, and they were told that I suffered from what was known as the sibilant S, which is just like a dead giveaway for a fag. That's anytime a comedian wants to make fun of gay people, they add that we hiss. We don't talk, we hiss. But anyway, I've had this, I have the accent. What can I say? Not my southern accent. I'm just got that gay accent. I open my mouth and I'm gay. But so they called on me to share, and I it was odd because I had been doing speed for so long that my synapses weren't firing correctly, and I was rendered mute. It's the weirdest thing, because this is 11 years later, and I'm so gregarious and outgoing. Speed rendered me completely mute. I could not speak. I couldn't put sentences together, and it scared me because of that, because I would try to talk to you, and I couldn't. Something odd happened. They called on me. I was on the first row to share, and my acting training kicked in, and I could speak in front of a group. But I was scared. I mean, it would be the opposite for most of our new friends here. The thought of coming up here, you would shit yourself. But, to speak one-on-one to somebody else, you could probably do that. It was the opposite for me. I could speak because my acting training would kick in, and I could speak. It was, and I had a lot of shame because I'd been in jail, prison. Let's just lay it on the cards on the table. Can't fool anybody here. But anyway, I had been in prison, and I talked a little bit about that, and then in California we applaud for everything, And who made the coffee? Oh, yes. Who's going to clean up? Oh, yay! Yay, yay. So they gave me some applause, and I'm an actor, so I thought, maybe there's like a little hope here. Well, then they called on Mikey in the back, big Mikey, big straight guy from Brooklyn, who, by the way, told my story. If you're new in here, I'd like to tell you, you're going to hear your story from the oddest person. This big, huge guy with this Brooklyn accent, straight as they come, talked about the broken toys and how he just felt we're all the toys that were tossed into that room that were broken, and here we are. And he told my story, but they called on Mikey in the back they said, Mikey, you want to wrap it up? Well, Mikey said to the young lady that just got out of jail, well, the room just stopped. And I've never been so horrified in my life. Well, everybody was going, Mikey, that's not a girl, it's a guy, So when the meeting was over, I was out the door and I was never coming back. If public humiliation was a part of AA, I did not want to be a part of it. And you know how we are, we can find any excuse in the world. So I was out the door, and this guy, this big, huge, his eyes like a cow, these big liquid brown eyes, this big butch guy, he chased me and he grabbed me and he said, listen, I don't hear well, okay? And he had tears in his eyes. And he said, I don't hear well, and I did not in any way mean to make fun of you. And then he said the magic words. See, we have these slogans that we just spout, our little bump, keep coming back, yeah. But we don't know, that maybe there's somebody that has never heard that. And he said to me, I hope, and he said it so sincerely, he said, I hope you keep coming back. And I hope to see you tomorrow. And I was raised by this mother where manners, I thought I had to RSVP, and it was it was such a quandary. I said, okay, yeah, I'll be here. And that was October 20th, 1997, And right after I got back the next day, somehow they tricked me, I think. This was not a clubhouse. This was a church where they had different meetings every single day, thus different secretaries every single day. Thus, every meeting had a different cleanup person. Somehow, I don't know, they led me to believe that my job was to mop the floors. I had guest starred on Murphy Brown. And I've never mopped a floor in my life. Somehow, I was led to believe that was my job, to mop the floor. And this is where the commitments come in, because that earns you your seat. I had to be there. That was my job. And I was still so afraid of people, I would slip out before the hand hold, and we had a mop closet, and I would sit in the dark in that mop closet with the door open, and I would watch for everybody to leave because I couldn't speak people. And newcomer, I have to tell you, we're just filled with rage. I just remember everybody thought I was so sweet because I was rendered mute and I couldn't speak, and I had this sweet little face, and if I didn't like the shirt you had on, I'd plot your murder. I was just filled. I would sit there in those meetings and everything bothered me. Just things bothered me. He raises his hand, he shares every week, They ought to kick him out or something. And I would sit in that closet and I would wait for everybody to leave. And I would roll, I had that yellow, like industrial mop thing. I would fill it with water, and I had the stuff I was supposed to put in there. There was dance classes there on Tuesday and Wednesday afternoon, so they were mirrored. It wasn't my job to clean the mirrors, but I did a good job. I cleaned the mirrors, and I would mop. I had seen on TV that sort of S thing they do. And I taught myself. And I was all here, and it was all alone, and it looked out onto this sort of garden. It was a beautiful Unitarian church. And it was quiet, and the meeting was over, and everybody was gone. And I would mop. I would start at this end, and I would go to that end. And you know what? That's just the best I could do. We talk in these rooms about how to get our self-esteem back, the way in which we get our self-esteem back, newcomer, is we do esteemable acts. And you don't have to be Mother Teresa. You know, it's something as simple in retrospect as keeping a floor clean. You know, that was my job, and I did it to the best of my ability. And the women that ran that church came up to me when I had about 6 months, and they said, we have had AA meetings in this room for over 20 years, but no one has kept the room as pretty as you have, and we would like to thank you. And I had to go into the bathroom and lock myself in the stall and just sob. And then at a year, they gave me a mop. For my 1 year, they gave me this big, beautiful new mop, and it had a bow on it. And I have to tell you, this being primarily a gay meeting, I got sober in straight AA. Now, what I encourage my sponsees to do, you need to drop anchor where you're comfortable. But I'm going to tell you right now, it was in straight AA where I learned how to slowly socialize. Because I don't know about the women, the gay women, but I know gay men, we know how to sexualize, but we do not know how to socialize. And because we grew up with a secret, and there was nobody to step up to the plate and teach us, we don't know how to put our hand out and look you right in the eye with nothing attached and say, hey, my name's Leslie, I'd like to welcome you to Alcoholics Anonymous. We never knew, and I learned that in straight AA. And then I did my 4th step, and I had this sponsor, this Irish boy. I couldn't understand a word he said, but he was so cute. But he said to me one time, he goes, I wish I could do that Irish accent, but he said something about, Leslie, after my 4th step, he said, it seems to me that your greatest fear in life is heterosexual men. Groups of heterosexual men. I said, well, no shit, it wasn't exactly a picnic during dodgeball, Smear the queer, and they'd hit me with that dodgeball. I said, my dad was a lieutenant colonel in the Army. He said to me, well, you know what? In Alcoholics Anonymous, we don't go over our fear, under our fear, around our fear. We work through our fear, and what I highly suggest, because, in Alcoholics Anonymous, we're not even supposed to really give advice. And I love the way my sponsor puts it. He says, I will tell you what to do. It's up to you whether you do it or not. But if you decide not to take my advice, then when you come back to me with that problem again, I'm going to say, baby, we're through with that problem. Because I gave you my experience, my strength, my hope on that one, and you didn't take it. So, my sponsor said to me, I want you to join an all-male stag recovery group. And I thought my bowels were going to let go. I'm telling you, I remember I said to him, I said, well, you know what, Mark, you asked me, when I asked you to sponsor me, was I willing to go to any lengths? And I said yes, but I have to tell you, I'm very fragile right now. And I don't know if I can walk into a room filled with heterosexual men, especially a room where you're supposed to tell your secrets. He said, you can do it. I went to Radford Hall, y'all, in Studio City on a Monday night. I'm telling you, it's this big. And the testosterone in that room, you can cut it with a knife. They get in, what's that thing they do in a huddle? They get in a huddle, and they don't do happy birthday. They go, for someone's birthday, they go like this, ooh, 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 and then ooh, like that. I mean, these were men. This was a room filled with the straightest guys. And you know what the deal is? They're pussycats until you get them in mass. You know what I mean? But there's something about straight guys in mass. And the way they act. And they it was that easy kind of masculinity that my daddy had it. That kind of slapping on the back and spitting. And a lot of you lesbians have it. But I don't know. It's that easy, you know what I'm talking about, that it scares me to death when I'm around that. It terrifies me. I'm real attracted to it, but we're not going to go down that road because we would never find our way home. But they had this easy kind of masculinity. The first thing I thought, because it was a big meeting like this, I walked in and I remember I looked and I thought, oh my God, I should have left my Merce in the car. I don't know anyone that doesn't know a Merce is our male purse. Straight guys carry bags, but it's something in the way that we carry it that makes it a mercy. As if, had I left my bag in the car, none would have been the wiser. That's the only thing that would have given me away. But I walked in with this merce, and I remember thinking, oh, God, I should have left it in the car. Well, I sat down, and because I had done speed for so long, and I was kicking, I don't think we talk enough around the rooms of alcoholics, of the importance, rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and CMA in our rooms, the importance of diet and exercise and just getting physically sober. You know, I have to tell you something. When I was 3 years clean from crystal methamphetamine and alcohol, 3 years, I had a massage, a deep tissue massage. You know, I've read a lot. You know, Hitler was the one who created, was on the forefront of the early days of methamphetamine. He gave it to his troops because it made them feel invincible, and it made them too paranoid not to fight. Now, that's in the history books. And this is stuff that I'd been putting in my body for 10 years. It gets into the marrow of your bones even. You know, so I got this massage, and something cut loose, and I was high. I walked out of there, and I called Don, and I said, I'm high. He said, no, you know what, baby, it's probably feelings coming up. I said, no, I'm high. Feelings coming up. I'm high. I don't know high. I mean, I'm high. And, you know, it took me like 3 days to get to, that was my final hurrah, people, 3 years sober. You know, that was my final hurrah. I got that shit out of my system. And I hesitate to tell that to new people, but the point being, you've got to, you know, realize that you're kicking drugs and you're coming off alcohol, and you've got to get your blood sugar level back. But what had happened to me was I shook. Here I was, I couldn't speak, and I would have these, not like panic attacks, but I shook. And they used to call me the Chihuahua. Oh, little Chihuahua, because I'd be over there just shaking. Like a little chihuahua. And so I sat in that chair in that room full of all those straight guys, and I was so embarrassed because I was so nervous. I mean, my teeth were rattling. And I sat there with my head down. We went around the room to introduce ourselves. And there's this, I don't know where, I used to use this trick, at least try to use this trick. There's a way that southern butch guys speak. I think it has something to do with tobacco in their mouths. I'm not sure. But they kind of talk and their lips don't move, you know. Like, damn, she got some big melons. Look, they talk. They kind of, you know, they talk, but they're, and so they got around to me. I said, my name is Leslie. My name is Leslie, and I'm honey, they were on to me. They were on to me. So near the end of the meeting, they asked me, they said, would our new friend like to come up and introduce himself and say hello and share if he wants? And it was a podium share. Do y'all have those, you know, meetings where you have to actually walk to the podium? I had heard a hilarious story. One of my best friends now, I didn't know him then, I'd heard this on his speaker tape, is Mark C. Y'all should have Mark C. from Dallas. Big old piano playing queen. Honey, makes me look like a hell's angel. I mean, this is a queen. She's banging that piano. She'll play the piano for you and sing and everything. Y'all should have him. But he told the funniest story. He said early in his sobriety, he had to go speak at a straight meeting, and he was nervous, so he called his sponsor, and he goes, I've got to tell my story, you know, in front of the straight people. Do you think I should tell them right off the bat, you know, that I'm gay? And his sponsor said, honey, you got to walk to the podium. I mean, they're going to know. Well, I'd heard that story that week. I think the 5 steps that I took from that place up to that podium, and I remember I got there and I looked out over, you know, the enemy. You know what it was? It was my daddy and all of his buddies. It was my lieutenant colonel of a daddy and all of his buddies. It was like this acid flashback where I'm in front of all of them, but something really, you know what? It was cathartic because I remember thinking, you know what? 42, you're sober, and this is the jumping off point, right here. And I took a deep breath, and I said, my name is Leslie, I'm an alcoholic. I'm also a recovering crystal meth addict. But more importantly, there's something that I feel for my sobriety I need to say out loud, and that is I am a homosexual. And I was waiting, for that smart aleck in the back. No shit! But it was like everybody forgot to breathe. The room was deadly still. And I forged on. I said, I am scared to death of you men. My dad was a lieutenant colonel in the Army. I never felt I measured up. And I'm afraid that you're going to be disgusted by me. I'm afraid that you're going to laugh at me behind my back. And I'm really, really afraid that you're going to shun me. But I was given direction to join this group, and I am too scared right now to not take directions. So I guess this is what you call a surrender. And when that meeting was over, I have to tell you the unconditional love that those men... I sort of became the mascot, our little queer. You met him? We got a queer? Here, tell him that. But listen, I never missed a meeting. I became an integral part of that group. And the oddest thing is that those men began to very slowly teach me what it means to be a sober man in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think a lot of times with gay men, even if we had dads, which I didn't, we were so far behind in what it means to be a man that there was nobody to step up to the plate and teach us, One of the guys came up to me. He had the one I was most scared of, this big guy, came up to me with a laminated card that he had made personally for me. And on that card it said, "What you think of me is none of my business." And he said, "You seem to care too much about what people think." And I carried that card with me in my wallet. And those men taught me, that it has very little to do with how much weight you can lift, how many women you've bedded, how far you can throw that football, all those things that I thought, I'm just going to go to my grave a dismal failure at that, which seems to come so easy to straight guys, that easy kind of masculinity. I can barely get down the street without somebody hollering. But I learned that the men gave me a code, first of all. See, we talk about these steps as working them, but newcomer, what we're giving you is this amazing code in which to live your life by. And I have to tell you that I can stand in front of you today, 54 years of age, and tell you that as long as I remain true to my code, I am a man. I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm a man, which is something that... that's not what I showed up for, October 20th, 1997. I am closer right now to my authentic self than I have ever been. My mom has always wanted a Cape Cod vacation. She's never been to New England. And I was going to be performing in Provincetown. Well, I don't know if you know this, but that's a homo hoedown, honey. Provincetown. There's Boston, and then there's a leg of land that goes out this way, an arm of land, and there's Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. So I flew my whole family, my mother, my Aunt Dot, who, when she farts, only dogs can hear it. I mean, my Aunt Dot was with that white helmet hair. She's a prim. My mother and my Aunt Dot wore white gloves when they left the house till I was out of grammar school. I mean, these are Southern ladies, and we got to Boston. I had a car waiting for all of us. I had rented the Copper Fox, which is the oldest house in Provincetown. It's an old sea captain's house with a widow's walk, and I was going to give my mother, this is last year, a New England vacation, and I invited my twin sisters to come, and so it was all of us in this big, beautiful, navigator heading out. And from the time you hit the arm of land to go out, there's no fast food. It's like stepping back in time. And then you hit a whaling village called Provincetown that was an art community that the gay people took over. The lesbians run it, and the men, we just kind of have, party. But anyway, like it should be. But anyway, it's this utopian. It's a utopian community. It's amazing, And so we start rolling into Provincetown, and here was Varla Jean Merman, this drag queen on a bicycle, hawking her show and screaming, and men holding hands with their thongs on, and I thought, what the fuck was I thinking? My mother was just... Because my mother, when I told my mother that I thought I was homosexual when I was 12 years old, thus began all kinds of, I've been in so many Christian therapists that would pray over me and tell me, when you have these feelings of sexual desire for somebody, that is the voice of the prince of darkness that you are hearing, son. I remember thinking, he's got a loud voice, because but, you know, it's just a wonder I'm saying. And so all of that. But over the years, my mother and I have developed this amazing. See, I realized in Alcoholics Anonymous and through doing my 4-step work and everything, my mother will never be Betty DeGeneres. My mother will never march in a P-flag parade holding a sign that says, I'm the proud parent of a gay son. It is not going to happen. But if I'm going to ask her to accept me as I am, Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me that I have to accept her as she is. And she is doing the best she can with the light she has to see with. And she adores me. And here I put her in the middle. We fly into Provincetown. And I thought, what am I going to do with these old ladies for 4? Well, I said to my aunt, I said, have you ever seen a movie called Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte? Well, my mother jumped in. She said, oh, I remember that movie. You thought Betty Davis was the bad one, and it was Olivia de Havilland that was the bad one. And I said, well, in town tonight they're doing a parody of it. Well, it was a drag show, big drag show. So I take my mother with that hair, that Baptist hair, and here they said, I have never seen my mother laugh that hard. You know, we're not a glum lot. And so my mother walked out of there, and she said, that's the funniest thing. I don't know whether she knew there were men dressed up as women. I don't know what she knew. But let me tell you something interesting that happened. Because I have been taught in Alcoholics Anonymous to be of loving service to my fellow alcoholic, I've learned over the years to take that outside, and I have been of loving service to the gay community on a bigger level than just within these rooms. And people would come up to my mother and thank her. This little queen came up to my mother and said, you know, your son's he's just a little gay Rosa Parks. For those of you that don't know, Rosa Parks was the black woman who would not sit on the back of the bus that incited the civil rights movement. And he said when he gets old and he's just drooling in his soup, there are going to be a lot of young gay men that are going to say, see that little old man over there? He did a lot for us. And my mother I didn't realize that I've kept my mother away from all that. See, my mother has no earthly idea that I have this amazing sober community that I adore and that adores me, and that I have this amazing, because my life has always been, well, this is my gay side, see, and this is my family, and ne'er the twain shall they meet. And so all of a sudden, here we are in Provincetown, and I'm 54 years old, sober 12 years, closer to my authentic self than I've ever been, and we had the most amazing vacation. My mother would get up in the morning. We would have lobster omelets for breakfast. We'd have lobster, those rolls for lunch, and then we'd have lobster at night. We ate. And Mother would say, what are we going to do tonight? We going to go to those shows? Let's go to those shows. And so when I took my mother to the ferry to send her back to Boston, because I had to rest, but my mother, with tears in her eyes, said to me, son, I'm so proud of you. And it was like the floodgates, you know, I'm just snotting and because, you know what, and then she told my sisters later on, she said, I think this week I buried my husband. You know, it was like she saw something of me in my dad. You know, I don't know. My dad was a dynamite. You know, he's a lieutenant colonel in the Army. He was a deacon in the church. They closed the school system. Chattanooga school system closed when my dad was killed in that plane crash. And my mother said, I think I buried my husband. You know, because I think she saw this side of me that only through Alcoholics Anonymous, I think, could I have allowed that to happen. You know, and then she said, can this be our family vacation? Well, I've one-upped her. On Labor Day, on August 22nd, my mother and my sisters, they're all flying to Seattle, and we're getting on the RSVP cruise. They called me and asked me to be the entertainment, and they said, we can give you 2 extra staterooms. And my mother called me today. She said, is this free? I said, Mama, it's free. All of it's free. I said, all we had to pay for was the tax. It was $195, the tax and the tips. And I'm taking all of them. And she said, this stateroom is listed for $3,800. And I said, I know, Mama, and it's all yours. And, you know, it has a balcony. And we're going to do 2,000 gay men, my mother and my sisters. But I bring that up because that is a gift of these rooms. You know, that's not what I showed up for. It's just, you become, if you work those steps, you know, those, and make them, not only work them, but make them a part of your life, you know, then you get closer to your authentic self. You know, that me that nobody knew, you know, and what a gift, you know, and it's free. I don't know how long I've gone, but I have this one other story. My mother is, there's no editing process. It just flows, and there's no segue. You can't keep up, you know. And you just roll with it. And on my 53rd birthday, I flew her out, and we were sitting over dinner, just the two of us, and she started telling me this story, and my mouth fell open. I always thought that my dad, I was a disappointment to him, you know. I wasn't good at sports. They tried everything. They put me on that T-ball thing. Do y'all have that here, T-ball? Well, I still couldn't hit it, and so they put me in the outfield, and Mama said I laid down, put the mitt over my face. I just had enough. And then when my daddy kept saying, son, get up, then I practiced cheerleader jumps that my friend and I... And when somebody would bat the runner in, you know, I was like, yay! And so, anyway, I'm 53 years old, and I'm sitting at dinner with my mom, and she told me this story. She said she remembered, she said, Leslie, you were such a wiggle worm when you were little. We could not get you to sit still. And when you were 3 years old, one of your daddy's army buddies was getting married, and he was determined to take you to that wedding. And I kept telling him, Alan, he won't sit still. Well, she said, I went with, you know, to try to, and I could not get you to sit still. You all over that pew, up, down, looking everywhere. She said, all of a sudden the bride came down the aisle. She said, you froze like a pointer dog. What have we here? She said, I could not get my eyes off that bride. She said, I watched that bride leave. And so we got home, and I had a little cousin, Karen. My mother and her sister, Dot, that I was just talking about, were pregnant at the same time. So my cousin, Karen, and I were only 2 or 3 months apart. And she was my little cohort in crime. And Mother heard us in the next room, and we were playing Bright and Goon. And I was the bride. And she said I had an angel food cake pan on my head. And I had taken her white bathrobe and put it on backwards. And it was empire waisted off the shoulder. It was just beautiful. And I was the bride. And I was making my little cousin Karen be the goon. She's the same one that years later we would play. We didn't know what drag queens were, but when nobody was home, my cousin and I would dress up in my mama's clothes, and I'd take a hairbrush and we'd do Diana Ross and the Supremes. And I was always, you know, Diana. And I'd tell my little cousin, you going to be the backup girl? Well, back the fuck up, because I've been crying. Woo-hoo. Well, so that Christmas, Mother said that my daddy wanted to take his 3-year-old son down to sit on Santa Claus' lap at the Loveman's department store. So he had all his army buddies with him, and they took me down there, put me on Santa Claus' lap, and Santa Claus asked me what I wanted for Christmas, and I spoke very loudly and clearly, so everyone could hear. I said, a bride doll. Well, Daddy went home, and he said, over my dead body, Peggy, I'm going to get that boy a bride doll right there in front of everybody. This is your doing. And so Mama said, well, listen, just don't mention it, and I'm sure he'll probably forget about it. She said Christmas Eve, it was all I could talk about, that I kept saying, Mama, Santa Claus said he's going to bring me a bride doll, a beautiful bride doll. And so she went to my daddy. She said, Alan, you're going to explain it to him in the morning, because my lieutenant colonel of a daddy 1958, in the snow, scoured Chattanooga, Tennessee, and he found his 3-year-old son. Mother said it was the most beautiful bright doll. And so when I came downstairs and I saw it under the tree, I squatted in the floor and peed. It was just too much. I just peed all over the floor. But and I sat there, and of course I teared up, and I said, Mom, I always thought I was a disappointment to him. She said, honey, your daddy loved you, and your daddy just wanted you to be happy. And that, I think, brings me to the end of my talk, in that the whole fourth step, where we drag all that stuff out. I'm going through that right now with one of my Al-Anon sponsees. He said, I don't want to talk about it. I said, it's like the sore, you fester it and we drain it, and then it can heal. We drag it all out, all that stuff that we don't want anybody to know, all that horrible stuff, and somehow, you create one day at a time. Because I'll never forget, I'll end with this, my very first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting that I could really pay attention. It was about 3 or 4 in. I was so overwhelmed because I had decided I wanted to do this and I wanted to do it right. And you people were talking about steps, and you were talking about sponsors and all this stuff. And this one wonderful lady named Miss Jane Gray, I just love her. She was this sweet little southern lady who had relocated to California, and she was very politically incorrect. She didn't know. She'd say this, the colored girl, and Oriental, and there was this old, what did she say that one time? Colored and Oriental, and she'd say, anyway, she was so politically incorrect. And but she was so sweet and filled with so much love. And she pulled me to the side and she said, listen, you seem overwhelmed. And I said, yes, ma'am, I want to do this right now. She said, the only thing, and this is what I would like for anyone new in this meeting to know, 2 things. You've got to get a meeting directory. That's real important. And you've got to get our text, because that's the best sleeping pill in the world. You read those. If you've been up for 10 years on speed like me, honey, read that We Agnostics. You'll But once you're older and you begin, you realize the amazing part of it. Because I have to tell you, when I read, this book was written, guys, in the 1930s. And when it talked about our fears, our resentments, and our sexual misconduct, without trying to be funny, I thought to my sponsor, I said, is that for the gay men? Because it just seemed we're just so resentful. I've never met a gay man. I'm just filled with resentment and fears, and sexual misconduct. Hello. That's a very polite term. When you've been up 6 days on crystal, it's just some really sick shit. But if you want to call it my sexual misconduct. But those are the 3 things that'll take you out. So as you get older and you start reading that book, you're going to see it's just brilliant. I mean, you're just, oh my God. But when you're new and you can't think straight, it's a wonderful sleeping pill. But what Miss Jane Gray said to me, and I love this, and I remember this all the time. She said, honey, the only thing you have to worry about is do not leave this meeting tonight without knowing when your next meeting is. We suggest 90 and 90 meetings in 90 days. So pick a meeting tomorrow, and then you might want to come to some of the people here and ask them, where you going tomorrow? And then between now and tomorrow, just do your best. And I thought, God, I can do that. She's explaining the sponsorship will come, the steps will come, but get in those meetings, and then you don't leave that meeting tomorrow without knowing what your next meeting is. And she said, honey, if you do it that way, you'll slowly build an amazing life. And I cannot tell you, I'm an alcoholic who got all the cash and prizes. I'll say that, I got a lot. I got my career back, I have I'm financially stable, and I wish that I could sit with each newcomer and tell you, you might win an Emmy, honey. But we see, I got that in. But we can't promise that. What we promise newcomer is a daily reprieve. A daily reprieve. And if you were the kind of drug addict and alcoholic I was, just one day clear of it. A daily reprieve that is contingent upon some kind of spiritual maintenance. But I tell you what, I can promise you, if you don't stick with us, none of your dreams will come true. So we even the playing field, see, for people like us that lost our families, lost our lovers, lost everything, lost our jobs. And we even the playing field so that you can springboard towards your dreams. You know, you got a shot. And I encourage you to dream big. And thank you so much for letting me share.